Hello and welcome to the Engineering Futures podcast. I'm your host, Paul Barker, and I'll be helping you explore the world of manufacturing by introducing you to successful people from across the sector. We'll touch on everything from personal experiences and professional challenges to contemporary issues affecting the sector, careers advice, and practical steps for employers who are looking to attract the top engineering talent. Join us as we get to know the people who have made a difference within the sector. Okay, so welcome Valentine, latest guest on the Engineering Futures podcast. So how are you doing today?
I'm very well, Paul, thank you, and I am delighted to be there.
Good. So we'll just kick it off just with a quick introduction. So if you just let everyone know kind of who you are and what you do.
So my name is Valentine Pietri. I'm sure you can hear I'm French. I am a mechanical engineer by trade, and I have studied and worked in manufacturing for the last 20 years until this year, where I founded my own company, Grow and Sustain, which is all about mentoring and supporting women in STEM to allow them to reach their goal, whatever they are. And I am also supporting companies for consultancy work to help them make their workplace more inclusive.
Okay, very good. So we'll come on onto that in a little bit more detail as we kind of get into it. I suppose the first question I would like to the first thing I would like to know is what inspires you to become an engineer, and was there anyone who helped inspire you to make that decision?
Right. So, you know Star Wars? R2D2, the little robot? Tuk, 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 is a guilty culprit. So, when I was a kid, I loved Star Wars and I loved robots, still do. And I think for me, it all stems from there. Like, as far as I can remember, I loved robots. And I was like, ooh, I want to know how they work. I want to build one. I want to do. And then the more I watched Star Wars, the more I was like, look at Princess Leia. She's so great. She interacts with the robots. She's a diplomat. She's a warrior. She rules. And that really inspired me.
Oh, that's really cool. So from seeing that, then how did you? So how old were you when you?
Oh gosh, I was really small, like 5, 5, 6. And I remember after that, everyone in my family bought me mechanos. Do you have mechanos in England as well? I remember playing with. I still have them somewhere. The kids mechanos, the bigger ones. And then as I grew a little bit older, the finer ones, so that you could do the helicopter. And so I think after that, because I was interested, everyone in my family supported me. And there was never, oh, that's for boys, or oh, that's, no, you're interested. There you go. I was of peace and quiet for the parents.
So in terms of having, then you've kind of had an idea that you want to like fix robots and build robots and do that
Right.
kind of stuff. So at what point? So how did you enter the engineering sector then? How did you first start in that role?
So I think for me, there's been a few turning points. So one, when I was in junior high school, I think the English equivalent. So I was 10, 11. We had 1 hour a week of technology where we learn how to do welding, how to do drilling, how to do plastic forming, how to do 3D. When I look back, that was pretty advanced what we did. And I just loved it. And I knew I wanted to do more of that in high school. So when I had to choose my option when I was about 14, I chose the curriculum that had the most technology. I think it was 3 hours a week, 4 hours a week, something like that. and I had to change high school, and I ended up in a class with 3 girls out of 30. I hadn't even imagined there'd be that many guys. I was like, oh, that's going to be exciting. I loved it. So I did that for 3 years. And then when I passed my baccalaureate, which is, I never know if it's the A level or GCSE, the one you have when you're 18 in France, I had to decide, okay, what do I want to do with my life? And I knew I love technology, I love mechanics. I used to love, the hand drawing, old fashioned. And I was like, okay, I had all the grades, why not? And I thought as well, being an engineer, I can not only, work with interesting technology, but I can travel because it's a job where you can easily travel around the world. And I was like, this is a no-brainer. And so my 17 years old self decided to go and become a mechanical engineer. And it's slightly different in France, but we do mechanical engineering school. To become an engineer, you have to go through those engineering schools, and which is the equivalent of a master here in England, a university master, but with a lot more hands-on approach, very hands-on. You have a lot of internship, you have a lot of working with a machine on the shop floor to do exercises and such and such. So that's how I became an engineer.
And in terms of then, what was your first job in the sector?
So my first job was contractor in Belgium. I knew I wanted to work abroad, so I looked for jobs abroad. And that contracting company contacted me and was like, oh, you have a lot of experience through your internship. I had done 18 months of internship, 6 in France, 6 in Japan, and 4 in Italy. They were like, yeah, you have quite a bit of, already a bit of experience. We're looking for someone for a 6 months contract to work in the quality department of company that does very cutting edge technology. I was like, oh, cutting edge technology. That speaks to me. And Belgium, this is abroad. And quality, well, that would make me a better engineer, the more round up engineer to see that. So that was my first role. Now I ended up staying 3 years as a contractor in quality in that particular company because I loved it, and I moved along within the quality department. The cutting edge technology was very cutting edge, so it was I was working on proton therapy centers, which are basically big. So you take a cyclotron, which is particle accelerator, radioactive particle accelerator that sends a beam in a machinery that's like a one-story house size, and that sends radioactive beams into a patient's cancer cells very accurately without burning everything around that cell. So very fascinating technology. I'm explaining that very poorly, but there's a lot of optics, radioactive, coding, mechanics, electronics, such and such. So working in quality within that environment, I could not have done that job without my accumulated technical knowledge. It was impossible. You cannot check something that complicated without understanding it. So that was my first role. And after 3 years, I was like, ooh, I fancy moving country again and exploring the world a bit more. And I just happened to have a friend who was working in Safran. At the time, it was Aircel in Burnley, in Lancashire. And she was like, oh, there's that role in quality. It's exactly like what you do in Belgium. Do you want me to send you the ad? I was like, yeah, okay, why not? And I applied and I got it. And the rest is history. That was 9 years ago. A bit more than 9 years ago, actually, now. And after within Safran, I evolved and I did, I think every 18 months to 2 years, I changed roles. So
Within Safran, you changed roles, and
within Safran, yeah.
Yeah, and that's quite interesting. And was that your choice to to change roles and to keep innovating and keep learning and developing as an individual? Because sometimes it's easy, and especially I imagine coming from a different country, that you might feel safe and secure in a certain role. I think to put yourself, how did you find putting yourself out there and absorbing new things and overcoming the language barrier as well, especially in Burnley, where we've got kind of like nice thick accents, How did you cope with the local lingo?
So I think for me, how did I find putting myself out there? It all stems from my first ever experience living abroad. So when I was 20 years old, I went for 6 months working in laboratory, a university laboratory in Japan. My English was really bad, really bad. I did not speak Japanese, and I had to speak with people in English. And you know what? After that, everything was easy. So that was because that was such a shock to the system. And I realized that actually, do you know what? Yes, I didn't speak the language. Yes, the culture was so different. I still could find a way to communicate. I could still work with people. We could still understand each other. I could still find my way around life. And I could, that was a time, where I didn't have a smartphone. You didn't have Google Map. You didn't have the automatic translator. That was 15 years ago, but, might as well be a millennial ago for some people. So, so I had to really deal with it by myself. And I did it. And it was fun. And I think that really shaped my, the way I see life. Oh yeah, sounds impossible. Oh yeah, that sounds out of comfort zone. It'll be fun. Let's go for it. So that's the way I've managed my career. Am I interested? Do I want to do it? I know I can. What's the worst that can happen? What's the best that can happen? And so, to answer your question about Burnley, I have to admit that although in Belgium I had been working in English quite a lot, it took me 3 full months to understand a word of what my boss was telling me. So my colleague that was sat next to me, I remember vividly, the boss was coming asking me something, proper strong accent with the lips in. And I was like, yes. And then I was like, what did he say? What does he want? So that was a challenge. One thing I would say though is that I've got lifelong skills. So now when I speak on certain words, I've got proper Burnley accent. I swear like a Burnley man. I've spent far too long on the Burnley shop floor and far too long at Burnley Football Club. And I was lucky that I was in a company that offered that many opportunities, and I never limited myself. I'm not saying it's been easy not to limit myself. I really had to. Yeah, it's not been handed to me on a platter, all those opportunities to change every 18 months or 2 years. It definitely hasn't been handed to me on a platter. But I knew where I wanted to go, and there was nothing stopping me. I knew where I wanted to go. I knew I could do it, and I went for it.
And they took a chance on you. They gave you that opportunity as well to kind of, reach your potential and to be the success that you've got on to be. And I think that I would imagine that you're grateful for the company, to allow you to kind of, grow and
Yes.
develop.
I think for me, I'm grateful to very specific individual with whom I would have never had the career I had without them. And the company itself is really supportive in developing talents. I think that's something to be said to the credit of the company. They really want to develop talents and to keep them. There's so many people that have been in this company for 10, 15, 20 years. I mean, I never thought I'd stayed 9 years. It's like you would have told me that at the beginning. I was like, whoa, 5 years max. And, and for me to stay 9 years, I was, it's because I kept developing, I kept learning, I kept having fun. But for me, when I look, there's been Yes, I can identify 4 people really that have been what's the word? Very influential in my career. So one, it's a director who decided I need to go and work. I was working as a quality engineer on the oldest product of the company, which was at the time the most profitable. And he was like, "Oh, there is a new development. We'll put Valentine." Because she's very rigorous. She speaks French. It will work a lot with France. She'll understand, and that really what. From there, I got the opportunity to do green belts, Lean Sigma green belts, and so that stemmed from it. The second person was my manager, who, when at a time when I was a quality engineer, I had been a quality engineer for several years, and I was like, "Oh, should I apply to that continuous improvement role?" Continuous improvement manager. And I was like, as much as I don't limit myself, they were asking for a lot of things. They were asking, you need to have a Lean Sigma black belt. I don't even have my green belt yet. Then you need this and that and that and that. And what she did, and I remember, the office. I remember her. She was like, right. She opened the job description and she read it line by line, and she said, "This, you know how to do it. This, you can do it. This, yeah, you'll learn. This, well, the black belt. You'll do it once you're in the role. That's what they do anyway," which I didn't know. But she knew more about the companies than me. Yeah, you know how to do all of that. Apply. And I was like, "Yes, boss." And I applied and I got it. And that really what got me into management. And I did that Lean Sigma black belt and such. So that was the second person. The third person was my manager when I was in continuous improvement. She was a woman, and what she did at the time, which I didn't realize until well after, she really took a mentoring approach, a development in mentoring, not just managing me, but mentoring me, developing me, letting me try things, letting me work things out, but also be a strong support and be a strong ally within the company. And the fourth person that has been instrumental, if I go a little bit back in time, is when I was working as a quality engineer, and my job was to eradicate defects on that new product development. When you put together a new product, you always have things to debug at the beginning. That's normal, isn't it? And he sat down with me every single day for an hour, looking at root cause analysis, making sure his team actioned all the actions that they were supposed to do. And one of the things that I've struggled most at the beginning of my career is being credible. Being heard when I was asking people to do things. You mentioned, like, how did you do it when you arrived? Well, with great difficulty, let's be honest. I couldn't understand English. But you had that 20-something-year-old French girl coming onto the shop floor asking guys who had been there since 10, 15, 20 years to do things. Because it was her job to do, I was doing audits, I was solving problems, and I was asking, right, okay, to solve that problem, you need to do this action, this action. And they're looking at me like, who is she? Why is she asking me that? What? And that took a great deal of effort to get anything done. By anything, I mean anything. The simplest thing. And I'm laughing now. I was not laughing too much back then. And, that engineer, that team leader of this engineering team that sat with me every single day, looking at root cause analysis of those problems and then making sure those actions were done, what he did is amplify my voice, is making sure we were working together, making sure it was seen we were working together. And I mean, he was doing his job. He was doing a great job. And I owe him so much. And I told him, I owe him so much because, one, I learned tons with him because he was a very seasoned engineer, so I learned tons. And two, he really allowed me to do my job in the best possible environment, because I felt supported, I felt heard, I felt, like I could be myself, that I can go to the go to the bottom of things. We didn't always agree, but that's just, quality and manufacturing engineers don't always agree. So it's, yeah, so I think those are the 4 people. That's quite a long answer.
No, and I think that's really nice to hear that. And I think that, I mean, we can come on to mentors a little bit later on, but to enable, that clearly enabled you to thrive in that role, to make you feel that you do have a voice, to make you feel that people are listening to, like you say, amplifying your voice. And sometimes it takes these people to kind of get on board, to get other people on board as well. And you don't feel kind of so alone, do you?
Exactly. And I think, that's something I've always been keenly aware, because when you're a foreigner in a foreign country, you've got like the double barrier. You're like, not only you're a woman in a very male dominated environment, but you're a foreigner and you don't have the same codes. You don't laugh at the same jokes. You don't understand there was a joke, or you make jokes that no one laughs at. Oh God, that's that. I find that funny now, but initially you're a bit like, oh, that was not funny. Okay, so it can be very unsettling. And I mean, I've done it plenty of times, let's face it, but because I've done it plenty of times doesn't mean it's easier. It means that you know what to expect. So it unsettles you a bit less. But also it means when you're in a new company trying to adapt to culture, like any one of us that change role or change environment, comes into a new company culture, has to adapt to that culture. You fit in or you don't fit in. And sometimes when you're a woman, you always have that question that how much should I fit in? How much should I become one of the guys? Or is it okay for me to be a woman and not be one of the guys? I mean, for years I've wanted to be called Mace, because that was a sign that you were one of the guys. And then when on the top of that you are a foreigner, you're like, okay, that's one additional layer where you don't fit in. And I have to admit that over the years, there's been teams and environments where I've thrived because I could really fit in. I worked with people who were very aware, who liked those differences, who liked the conversation we could have and the different point of view and the different ways of working. Because a French engineer is trained very differently from an English engineer, and there is real richness in having the two work together, because you come at it from a different point of view and you solve problem more efficiently. You see more things. And as much as there's been teams where I've thrived, there has been times where I didn't fit in at all, as a woman, as an engineer, as a foreigner, where I was a bit like, oh, why am I doing that to myself? But, that happens to all of us throughout the life of a career, I think. I think it happens to all of us. And it's being able to recognize, what's helped me is being able to recognize when what I was feeling was because I didn't fit in. Like I was feeling, oh, I'm lonely. Is it because I'm missing France? No, it's because I don't feel like I belong and I fit in. What can I do to fit in? What can I do to change my environment? What can I do to not be a victim of the situation, to take back the ownership? And I think that what makes a difference is your mindset through life and through the situation.
So in terms of challenges that you faced as you say, as a female engineer, as a someone coming from a different country, what would you say was some of the biggest challenges that you faced within your career? And that might have been at the start of the career or as you've got more into your role, and how did you overcome them?
So for me, the one challenge that remained throughout my entire career. So perhaps a tiny bit of background. So after I moved into continuous improvement and did my Lean Sigma black belt, I become a continuous improvement business partner. So I worked with the directors of the business unit to help them put together the strategy and the improvement plan of the business unit. And then I supported the delivery of that improvement plan. So meaning coaching project, mentoring project, doing whatever necessary to support the delivery of this improvement plan. Running Kaizen and such and such. And then I moved on into being in charge of the improvement plan for the site, the factory site. And then I became the site risk manager. And when I left, I was leading the digital transformation project for the site. So when I evolved more towards those senior roles, I realized that actually the problem I faced were exactly the same one as what I faced when I started my career. It just the symptoms were different. So it was all about being heard and being taken seriously. And don't get me wrong, I think we face those issues both as men and women, in a career, in an environment. How do I get heard? How does my voice carry? How do how do I have people taking me seriously? I think though, although we both men and women face it, it is a bigger problem for women. And I've definitely felt it across my career. So for me, a few symptoms: you're in a meeting, you talk, it's clearly, you're clearly the expert on the topic, no one's listening to you. So what do? There's lots of tactics. I'm not going to enter it there because we'd be there for 2 hours. But there's lots of things. People cut over you. So now I'm the queen of cutting over people. I've learned now. I'm not saying don't do that. Don't do that, people. This is rude. This is rude. Well, this is one thing that I developed over my career. I was like, well, if you're cutting, I'm cutting right back at you. No, me. This is so. Don't do that. This is not a healthy working practice. One thing I had to develop to be heard and to be taken seriously is one I had to work really hard and to prove results. One thing as a woman, you have to prove results. So you have to show your results. They need to be tangible. They need to be written. They need to be measurable. And then there need to be no question asked about how good of a job you've done. And I've seen that time and time again. Men, women, equal performance. What happens is that the woman will downplay her performance, saying, oh, it wasn't that big of a job. It really was. Where the man will actually, statistically, the man will speak 33% more about how good of a job it was or is done. And they don't know why. They don't know why. They've not found, it's not a confidence matter. It's not I want that pay rise matter. They don't know why. So straight away there is this, equal job. As a woman, we're not talking as much about how much of a good job we've done, but equally, people looking at our job will find it normal for a woman. Yes, you've done a good job, of course. Like, that what was expected. But looking at perhaps a male counterpart, oh, well done, mate. That was great. Thank you so much. Da, da, da. And you're like, seriously? So, but frankly, one, you get used to it, which is wrong, but you do. It's a reality. So I think for me, that's one thing that was really impactful. But what you have to do after that is develop your influencing skills. How are you taken seriously? If you do such a good job and people don't really see it, how do you promote your work so it's visible? And that's where it's very important to have good, strong allies within the companies and have developed those relationships. Because naturally, as a woman, you are different from people around you. So they will relate less to you. That's normal. Humans, we like people that are like us. So if naturally you're not like the people around you, I'm not saying they like you less, but then naturally you'll fit in less well. So what you have to do is to find another way to fit. If you're not a man, you're never going to be a man. You can try as much as you want if you're interested, to talk on topics you have in common with people. I mean, I spent years talking about football. I don't like football, but that was my way of fitting it. You have to develop the influencing skills. How do I get my work at the forefront? How do I show my value? How do I build this relationship without selling my soul? I'm not talking about brown nosing here, excuse my language. I'm talking about showing the good work you're doing, making it visible for people to see in a way that they have no other option to say, wow, what a good job. Actually, you're really good. How do I promote you? So there is an unfairness into that, in the way that it feels like the women have to do all the job. They have to do all the work to get promoted. It shouldn't be like that. It should be that anyone who look at their work be like, wow, that's a brilliant work.
Yeah. It's really interesting, isn't it? Because I'm thinking back to, do you think some of this is that, and I'm not saying all men, but what I've found is working in the sector, sometimes men are uncomfortable around women. They don't know how to engage. They don't, do you think there's an element of that as well? It's their own insecurities that kind of affect your ability to be one of the team. Do you think there's an element of that?
I'll answer with an example. I'm quite, as much as I could describe myself as a hand of steel in a soft glove, in terms of influencing skills. The only times in my career where I've had extremely strong, almost violent arguments were with men 45 to 50 years old. And it had nothing to do with them. It had nothing to do with me. It was just, there was a situation. And I think for me, reflecting back, I do think that my behavior, what was driving me, what I was displaying in terms of, attributes. I'm not saying I was the best. I was not, like when you're young, you, well, you go for things, don't you? I think that could have been perceived as threatening. That was threatening a certain view of the world, threatening a feeling of, but I know how to do that. I've got all that experience and she's got less experience. And why is she doing it perhaps better or perhaps in a different way? And she's just a girl, And I was just a girl. I was in my late 20s when I had all those issues. She's like, she could be my daughter, And, so I think there is that perception that I have seen quite a few times happening of being perceived as threatening, especially when you're a young woman climbing the ladder, perhaps quite fast, and being quite direct and knowing what you want and not being scared of saying what you want and not taking no for an answer. I mean, I take no prisoner when I want something, but equally, I'm in an environment where I have to take no prisoner if I want something, otherwise I'd never get anything. Do you know what I mean? So I think that can be really perceived as threatening because that threatens a certain view of the world. And that view of the world has been shaped by centuries and centuries and centuries and millennia of histories. I mean, I'm not going to redo a world history there, but I think we both know that historically women have a certain place in society. And I mean, it's only recently that women can vote, that women can have a bank account, then I mean, it's been like a century, which when you look at the scale of the world, is nothing. So there are some, I think, some perception that some biases that are very ingrained in society, but not personally. I've come not to blame it on individuals. When I was younger, I'm not saying when I had those arguments or when I had men telling me I will not work for a young woman. Oh yeah, I definitely did blame it on the individual. Let's face it. Now I'm, I've got a bit. I took a step back on those topics and I looked at it slightly differently. I really think that for men in those environments to feel more comfortable around young women and to feel more comfortable around women managers, because then after, once you become a manager and you have to manage men twice your age who have so much more experience than you, but you as a manager, that's a whole different set of challenges, isn't it? And that's where you can even have more clash because you're definitely threatening. It's like, what? You're like, what? Who is she to tell me what to do? You're like, it's not them. It's society. It's the way our legal system is put together, the way our educational system is put together. I'll give you an example. Paternity leaves. Like, why do men not have paternity leaves the same as women? I was reading recently that there are 74 companies in the UK that have now installed equal maternity and paternity leave for the employees. It's for people to change and evolve and feel more at ease and feel less threatened. Society needs to change, and it starts by the rules in place, the rules at government level, the rules at company level. If both have the same paternity and maternity leaves, they're both as invested. The kids will be as invested in their relationship with men and women. I don't have kids, so I'm perhaps not the best person to talk about that, and I fully acknowledge it. But it's creating straight away that balance. So then, it's not always mommy that's called when the child is ill at a nursery. And then the impact on the career is exactly the same on mommy and daddy. And because the impact on the career and the break, for the maternity and paternity leave is the same, well, then perhaps that removes that bias. Is, oh yeah, but if she's going to have kids, we can't have her in that role because we need someone that'll be fully present for that project. I would have been really interested to know what would have happened to my career if I'd had kids.
Yeah, I think it's a very good point, and I think that it's funny, isn't it? Because when you so there's, I mean, just thinking about when I was an apprentice working in a company in Burnley on the shop floor, and what the perception of those older men was of the young women who worked in the organisation. And I think that, ignorance, lack of education, call it what you will, but what you've got to remember as well is these people. So there's a working men's club in the area that until recently, and I'm talking maybe within the 10, 15 years, they used to have a line that separated the bar to where the snooker tables were, that women couldn't cross. Women weren't allowed to walk over that line. And these are the people that will be going into those working men's clubs that see this line that a woman can't cross, are now working in these factories, expecting women to have an equal voice. Well, that's just never going to happen, is it? Do you know what I mean? And whilst you can't condone their outlook on terms of black equality, you can argue it's probably not necessarily their fault because this is where they live.
Exactly, I agree. And I completely agree with you. For me, it's much bigger than the individuals. It's about the rules within society. So now that line is not there anymore, and the younger generation going to start working in clubs are not going to see that line, what's going to happen? I'd be interested to know. And that's the same for everything. So for me, there are two things. One, the lines needs to move at government and at company level. We cannot remove the responsibilities that companies have to make those lines move, because they can if they want. But first, they need to acknowledge there is a line, which most companies don't. More and more do, because the law, government, is forcing them towards, corporate social responsibility, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Those are topics companies now have to talk about. But the same as health and safety perhaps 30 years ago. Now we talk about them. And then we have to really do something about it. Health and safety, now, it's taken very seriously nowadays, isn't it? Which is good. So the lines are moving. And there is really responsibility at governments, at companies, and at council levels. But I also think there is individual responsibilities, both for men and women, to educate themselves, to listen when they're talked about to. Because it's easy to be I can't even count how many discussions like that I've had in the last few months. It's explaining what the problems are. I'm like, okay, here are the difficulties I faced as a woman in the manufacturing world. But what about men? They face difficulties too. That's the number one response I get to every single conversation, which is why I'm always very cautious. You might have noticed throughout this conversation to say both men and women, because I want men to keep listening to this conversation and not just switch off saying that she's ranting about feminism again, And I'm not exaggerating. I wish I was, frankly. So I think collective responsibility, from the institutions, including companies, but also the individual responsibilities to perhaps not understand, but acknowledge there is another point of view. Acknowledge that someone's experience might have been harder than yours in different ways. That doesn't mean your experience is not valid. That doesn't mean your career, you might not have faced difficulties. That doesn't mean, no, we can both, men and women, have faced difficulties, but those difficulties will be different. And perhaps in some cases, to be fair, a lot of cases, it will have been harder for women to evolve in that particular environment.
Yeah, I think there's absolutely no doubt that is the case. And, I think that where you've got people who are trying to compare, well, this is what happened to me and I don't know. I think that I don't know how you feel personally from being involved, from when I was working in education and seeing there are more young women now that are getting into, that are being interested in engineering. And from my experience, I'm not kind of generalizing here, but what I found is the young women that did come into engineering were absolutely bob on as well. Really, really good. A lot of these have gone on to become already, in the mid to late 20s, kind of middle management,
yeah, of course,
being pushed for senior leaders. These are absolutely bob on. So how do we get it even better? How do we get more young women into the sector? And how do we ensure that, as you were able to, that employers do, I'm not saying offer extra support, but how do they make sure that they can thrive and grow within an organization?
So for me, there's two things. There is encouraging more young women to get in, definitely. And I think that comes just by making it visible. A lot of people do that very well out there. The STEM ambassadors are doing a fantastic job, making sure girls know it's a possibility for them. So it's educating the girls and educating the parents as well, saying that, yes, this is an environment where your girls can thrive, that there are careers open there. And for me, and it's perhaps the most tricky, is once they're in, how do we make them stay? Because as you're saying, a lot of the girls, and that's something I've seen myself. I mean, I was like that too. You're a woman in that type of environment. You're not there for, dilly-dallying. You love what you're doing. You're motivated. You're focused. You're doing a good job. Because frankly, that's the only option. So you work. And usually the promotion to that first level middle management, no problem. You get there. You have to graft, but you get there. Where it becomes more complicated is getting into those senior positions. And then after getting to that director level. That's where it becomes more complicated. And that's where a lot of women give up. So for me, the second challenge is, as much as, first challenge, getting girls in. Second challenge, making women stay in STEM. Because I don't have the statistic in mind, but a lot of women leave the STEM sectors. All those efforts to bring them in, to push them up, and they leave. So for me, we can act on 3 different levels. One, women need to see that it is possible for them to achieve their objectives in those companies. I remember vividly, at some point in Safran, there was, it's not the case anymore, but the MD was a woman. One of the business, and at the same time, one of the business unit director was a woman. What message did that send me? It's possible. That's the message it sent me. So they need to see it's possible. So that means that every company should make a conscious effort and ask themselves, am I diverse enough? What can I do to make those paths, to have example of that's possible? You won't make me believe there's no women that women are not good enough to be promoted as directors. There's loads of women out there that are really good and that can be promoted as directors. So there needs to be a conscious effort. Second, what is the definition of success of the company? In companies where the culture is working all hours of the day, where the culture is push yourself, never complain, a typical man, if I can speak like that, like, I'll take it on, it'll be fine, and then piles up. It's not for nothing that men's suicide rates are so high, unfortunately. So some of the company's culture are very masculine in that sense, just don't complain, crack on, Is that, I think, is that really a culture that should remain? Should we have a culture where perhaps being more empathetic, being more open, being more talking about things, talking about those elephants in the room is perhaps healthier? And I know a lot of people say, well, that's for women, that's very typically women. No, it's like everyone can be empathetic, everyone can be open, everyone can talk about problems, whether they're personal and mental health problem or whether they're work problems. I think it's creating a culture that's healthy, properly healthy, and that will make women stay. Because what tends to happen is that if as a woman, you are naturally very empathetic, you are naturally a number of things, and you are for years and years and years in an environment that's completely different than you, and you mold yourself to that environment, you almost become a different person. You ask women out there, in engineering roles, do you ever feel like a different person at work and at home? There come a point, and up to a point it's normal. We all have work personas, but feeling like a completely different person inside and outside is not normal. And it leads to depression, it leads to burnout, it leads to just a lot of very negative things. So a lot of women choose to just leave and to be themselves. So creating an environment where women can be themselves as individuals, some women will be more driven than men, some women will be less empathetic than men, and it should not matter. We should all, men and women, be able to be ourselves, our professional self, at work. So changing that culture. And the third one, so creating visible examples, creating a culture that allows every individual to thrive. And the third point to make sure women stay is, for me, making sure that they have a clear development plan. And I think that, you'd say, well, it's the same for men engineers. Yes, but I do think there is a tendency in the engineering world, in the STEM world, to have women push towards a certain type of jobs. Let's say take a room of engineer with one woman in the room. Who takes notes of the minutes of meetings? Who's doing all the planning of the Christmas parties or what we of the ongoing projects? Who's doing all those tasks? Use those organizational tasks, those keeping the team together tasks, and that's what they usually promoted really well as well, quickly, because there's a tendency, especially for engineers. I mean, engineers, we are, I think, more organized, quite regimented down the way. And if on the top of that you've got the willingness to do it all, well, that helps you shine. But the thing is that will that also mean that when you talk with your manager or when you talk with your HR, they will say, well, actually, you do really good project manager, or actually, you'd be really good in that support function. Or actually, what you want to do is become an expert in a design expert or a material expert. But since that door is open there for progression, well, you might take that door, but it perhaps is away from what, if you'd had the choice, a true choice, where you would have gone. I don't think it's a coincidence if there is that many women that many. That's a grand word. If there are more women in support functions on manufacturing sites, for example, because naturally that's where they've let, space has been created for them. If you look into the design office, into production manager's office, will you see as many women? And so for me, the third item is making sure there is a true development plan and not the, you're good at project managing. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. So I think now it would be good to tell me a little bit about your business. So we have both recently kind of broken the shackles, and kind of gone on to launch a business, which is a scary and daunting thing. To kind of risk it all to do something which we are both very passionate about. For me, it's about helping people get opportunities to work as an engineer, and for you, it's something a little bit different. Just talk a little bit about your business and about what that business does.
So for me, my focus is about supporting women in STEM. So supporting women in male-dominated environments. So what do I mean by supporting? I mean helping them solve what keeps them up at night. Be it that they don't know how to progress because they've reached a plateau. They've had a conflict with the colleagues. They don't know how to solve it. They, helping them solve what's keeping them up at night. So I do that by mentoring them. So I use my own experience, and I also use a lot of coaching techniques. I'm an accredited coach to support them in building a plan that's actionable for them. And very often that starts by looking at how do I manage myself? Then how do I manage the situation? Then how do I move forward? So that's the first aspect of my work. The second aspect is working with male-dominated companies who want to make their culture more inclusive. So what do I mean by that? Perhaps recently there's been an incident in a company. I'm not going to quote anything gruesome, but I've seen a few things that were, not the best. Perhaps there's been an incident and the company decides to do something about it. So we start by doing an audit of the workforce well-being, and the male audit and the female well-being audit will be different, with different types of questions asked to target particularly the challenges that both men and women might be facing at work. That are different. They both face challenges, but they're different. And once we've had that audit, we look at, okay, how do we improve the situation so the type of incident that perhaps triggered the work package doesn't happen again. So that's one example. Other companies might want to attract more engineers and attract a more diverse workforce. And albeit they might not be in a bad place, but they want to become even better. So I do a similar piece of work with them to help them increase their inclusivity and make it a better place to work for, in fairness, both men and women. It's going well. I'm not going to lie, this is a roller coaster. As we both know. And this is going well. So I started in end of April this year, and it's going well. I now have customers. And what I have found the most rewarding, and that I keep hearing again and again and again, is from women, both in corporate settings or in one-to-one, or when I give a talk or when I go and speak to universities, is, I can't believe you said that. So it's good someone talks about those things. And that really makes me realize that there is a need to voice those topics. Albeit it's uncomfortable, albeit the way I talk about it might not be perfect, but there is power in voicing things, because that brings it at the forefront.
Yeah, and it is. And I think, like you said then, Fincy, I can't believe you've said that. That's a fantastic comment to hear, I bet. You know what I mean? That we kind of, and sometimes, things need saying, don't they? That's things do need saying, because if you talk about removing that line that women can't cross, like when, at one point, did anyone say, why is that line there?
Exactly. It's like, no, but, and exactly, and frankly, that's where it all starts, isn't it? And I mean, I spent years and years doing problem solving in my various roles, and it's all about the questions you ask. And let's just put it that way, I am not scared of asking questions.
So if we've got people listening to this now, if we've got women that are listening to this either sat within a position of influence within a company where what you are saying really resonates, or you've got other women out there that are kind of would like to access your help and your guidance, how do they get in touch with you? What's the next steps?
So the primary way to get in touch with me, you can send me an email at valentine@growandsustain.com, or you can link with me on LinkedIn, Valentine Pietri. So it's spelled Pietri. Connect with me, send me a line. I'll be really, really happy to hear from you.
Awesome. Well, what we'll do is we'll make sure that your details are kind of attached to the podcast so that people can get in touch. But Valentine, wow, an hour has just passed. That's been what a great conversation. And I think, super inspiring to hear about the work that you're doing and the difference that you're making, so congratulations with that. And, keep flying the flag, because I think you're a superstar.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. And I do get a bit passionate when I talk about those topics. No, but thank you. I really appreciate it. I really love the work you're doing as well to reframe human resources and how we recruit engineers.
Yeah, so I think between us, we just need to start earning some money now, don't we? And then
let's change the world. Are we not earning money already?
That's great. Thank you very much, Valentine.
Thank you.